Welcome back for episode 29, the conclusion of the Astronomical Apocrypha, the Seleukid Empire narrative Let's Play for Rome 2 with Divide et Impera. Last time, Seleukos II, having dispersed his own army among the eastern satrapies, returned to Antioch at the head of an enormous parade into and through the capital city. The army and the whole spectacle having been conveniently arranged in advance by his friend and lieutenant Hyginus. Quickly dispensing with the formalities of the occasion, Seleukos turned his attention to the imperial ledgers, consulting with the Syrian noblewoman Alcmena, who disclosed the shocking truth of the kingdom's dire financial situation: unpaid soldiers, bureaucratic inefficiencies and corruption, and the fantasy of unending conquest and spoils of war giving way to the reality of stabilizing a global empire. As Seleukos struggled in the wake of Alcmena's death to reform a stable and sustainable economy, Antiochos Hierax took no heed of his brother's command to return to Antioch, instead continuing his journey into Gaul, subjugating the Sessetani and then turning his hostility on the nearby Massalians. I can defend this city, but not with this garrison. If, on the other hand, you had not allowed him to take our best young soldiers on his warmongering expedition to the north. It was the Council's very reluctant decision, made with the information we had at the time, Gelon. He wasn't supposed to survive the odds against him. What about your recommendation to acquire Tolosa from the Sessetani? Leave it in the past. My recommendations are as follows. Fortify the northern gate, construct an inner wall around the temple district, and order an evacuation of the outlying settlements. Already my fields and orchards go untended. The young women will not venture to the temple of Demeter, and now the goddess's only supplicants are wildlife that frequent the area. Will you not fortify the port? The merchant fleet is our most valuable asset. No, Melanthios, I don't have the manpower to defend your orchards or your mercantile fleet. Anyway, the hawk will not approach by sea, and has become a renegade in his own land. If the Roman can be believed. Ah yes, your friend who shelters in the city. Is a man who betrays a betrayer then a loyalist? We can't afford to trust him at this point, or, gods forbid, allow the people's favorite errant champion to return, not only victorious, but as the savior of the city. Agreed, but what if the city should fall? Then get us out by boat, and tell the Roman we agreed to his pact, although I'm sure we'll regret it. Of course, we have a couple of sieges to attend to this turn, as Antiochos restocks his supplies in Genoa and prepares to make the trek through the Alps once the snows have melted. Seleukos is still preoccupied with imperial economic reformation, although I should note, even I did quite a bit of further building in this episode, you won't see the effects of most of these efforts in the time we have left. This is due in no small part to the extremely long building times in Divide et Impera, a feature that's designed, I'm sure, to fit the generally slower pace of the game in this mod, like the 4 turns per year, the removal of forced march stance, and the very deliberate pace of the battles, although I've been running the ultra-fast battle submod since the very beginning. With all of that said, I'm sticking with my usual building theme of commercial, cultural, and slave trade income in the wealthier provinces, while I've tried to use the less profitable locations for industrial buildings. I haven't done any in-depth analysis to support this strategy, but neither would such be very beneficial now since this is an already obsolete version of DEI. food is starting to get a little bit scarce, and so I've made a determined effort to build up the farm, the green minor settlement agricultural building line, and the Traveler's Lodge/City Inn, the yellow major settlement cultural line, and some of these will factor into the campaign before it's over. Suffice to say, we'll be trying to maintain the delicate diplomatic situation in order to in turn maintain our minimum 15 trade partners as we wait for our economic changes to take place. And at the same time, I'll be trying to cut costs and tweak the income by trimming armies and deploying governors. However, by our set victory conditions, we still need to conquer one region for economic victory. The Massalians have long stood apart from the rest of the Greeks, but by Hierax's reckoning, their time for independence is over, as he brings the Hawk's Talons through the mountain pass and begins deploying his siege equipment at the eastern edge of their city. We could probably win this battle with a slight edge on the balance bar, but I'm in no hurry at the moment, and it would certainly make Hierax's life easier if the bickering Massalian city council panic and decide to sally out. Antiochos' older brother Seleukos, on the other hand, has no need for his massive 20-stack army, as he's firmly ensconced at Antioch on the Orontes, and this force definitely stood out as I perused the list of forces in search of a place to cut costs. It features quite a few elite infantry, and although the upkeep costs in Rome 2 are fairly reasonable for even fantastic infantry like these, we still managed to save about 4,500 talents by disbanding them. My other matter to attend to this turn is Dymas' somewhat inconsequential fight to subjugate the Arvesi at Noria. He's already begun the siege there, and I'm starting to build some siege equipment for his army as they prepare to make their assault within the next couple of turns. The appeasers from within both of our opponent factions come forward in the end-turn phase to make their offers for peace. The Massalians starting with an offer of 2,000 talents, although their wealth is apparent as they progressively increase their offer as Hierax repeatedly demands complete subjugation to Seleukid rule. And eventually the negotiation breaks down. Dymas makes a similar counteroffer to the Arvesi, although they quickly rescind their original payment and retreat from the talks, evidently having nothing further to offer. Unfortunately, we've lost trade access to the Getae, presumably due to changing territories in the northeast, which is one of the main two areas of ongoing conflict, the other being the gigantic war being waged between the Carthaginians and the Celtiberian Confederation. As before, there are several potential trade partners in the diplomatic list, but none of them are friendly enough to establish an agreement, so a single turn into this episode, my inability to maintain our existing trade partners on top of the necessary loss of Massalia from the group has already dropped my number of trade relations from the requisite 15 to 13. And just as our income has been steadily ramping up and closing in on the 90,000 talents, it looks like this economic victory could slip from my grasp. All I can do to enhance the number of trade partners is wait, subjugate neighboring factions, maintain our diplomatic reputation, and hope for the best. Meanwhile, our food supply has dwindled to a paltry surplus of 1, so I went a little crazy this turn looking anywhere and everywhere to upgrade the agricultural apparatus. Although as noted before, this reaction will have little effect in the near term thanks to the relatively long building times, so we just have to hope that I had the foresight to get enough farms going in the last episode, or at least a few that will be complete before my settlement upgrades that rapidly drain the food supply. With all of that said, there are quite a few negative seasonal effects from the hot summer that hit various parts of our kingdom, so I'm hoping that a bountiful fall harvest next turn will give us a little breathing room. Having spent my money for the turn, and not having finished our siege engines at Massalia or Noria, I'm eager to get through the hot summer months and hit the end turn button. This results in the camera immediately zooming over to where Dymas has the Arvesi under siege, and at the time I was playing I mistook this for an enemy sally, not recognizing the siege equipment was still there, even the option to maintain the siege rather than commit to battle. Why this happened I'm not sure, but I was clearly fooled, and as a result we get to make our assault a turn earlier than I had planned. So as you can see, despite the tear in the Total War space-time fabric that's causing the siege to occur outside of our turn, there's otherwise nothing out of the ordinary here. We're assaulting Noria, a walled barbarian city that's positioned asymmetrically at the western and slightly northern section of the map, scattered low hills and forests dotting the landscape around the city. Because of the city's asymmetrical location on the map, it's approachable from 3 sides, and by default we're situated on the north. However, after surveying the map, I decided to take a two-pronged approach to this assault, putting 2 of my Lithobolus engines on the southern side and defending their position with a row of pikes and hoplite. The strategic thinking here being I can bombard the southern wall to smithereens, opening a wide swath of breached wall through which my phalanx can make a unified approach. The remainder of the army, including the other Lithobolos, the siege equipment, and the legionaries are going to make a traditional assault on the northern wall. I'm hopeful that this approach will force the AI to choose one or the other to defend, letting me move in and flank their force from one side or the other, or possibly snatch control of the victory objective if it's left undefended. Having trained my stone throwers on the walls to the eastern side of the gatehouse, I get the battering ram started on its ponderous journey toward the northern gate, and as it rumbles forward I kill time by taking a few shots of my own from the northern lithobolus, with the usual highly variable success seen with the manual fire mode in DEI. The northern wall has about 5 units defending it that we can see, and so I decide that a determined assault on the ramparts is not out of the question. So the order is given for the ladders to be sent forward to join the ram, while the Jewish slingers move up to screen the rest of our infantry, who in turn follow behind. Back on the south side of the wall, we're making good progress by this point, a couple of wall sections already weakened as evidenced by the crumbling stonework. The first breach opens up on the southern wall, and I set the stone throwers to work on one of the 2 adjacent sections, both of which have already suffered significant structural damage by this point, the inherent inaccuracy of the equipment mattering much less when you're dealing with an expensive target and double the ammunition. The northern lithobolus is doing its work, but not nearly so quickly, and by this point both ladders have arrived on the northern wall, and the legionaries jump from the top rungs onto the ramparts, eagerly engaging the lower quality Celtic garrison infantry at the top. Also by this point the ram has finished its work on the northern gate, and a 3rd unit of legionaries begin moving the equipment out of the way and readying themselves for the terrible charge through a torrent of boiling oil. A 2nd section of wall crumbles on the south side of the city, and the pikemen and hoplite have already started their advance, now on a course to reach the wall around the same time that the 3rd breach opens. The thorax legionaries have reached the inner facing of the northern gatehouse, and having braved the enemy missiles and boiling oil with horrendous casualties, the survivors managed to at least drive back the Aravisi from the immediate vicinity, paving the way for Dymas and the rest of his infantry to enter the city as the fight continues on the ramparts to either side. The death and destruction underway at the northern gatehouse, combined with the massive breach through which the pike phalanx makes its approach in the south, has persuaded the Aravisi to abandon the southern approach entirely, leaving my men to secure the gatehouse and adjacent towers with only a few arrows shot by the retreating defenders to oppose them. Though the adjacent thorax legionaries and the Illyrian levies have taken heavy casualties, the heroic Dymas, scourge of the barbarians, is now within the city with his elite shield bearers, and they don't disappoint, quickly driving back or routing the enemies attempting to defend what's left of the northern gate. The walls remain hotly contested, but with the courtyard clear and the northern lithobolus finally having opened a breach, the way is now clear for the rest of my troops, the slingers along with the cavalry, to join the melee infantry inside the city. The slingers busy themselves with occupying the northern capture point, passing the time by pelting the nearby Celtic archers with their stones, and Dymas leads his men to the left, into the flank of the group guarding the eastern section of the northern wall, quickly routing that group as well, and it's not long after this that the western group of legionaries take control of the western segment and then begin capturing the tower. With our infantry now inside the wall and approaching the victory objective from 2 sides, my goal is to get set up for a multi-pronged assault on the objective itself, capturing the intervening towers on the way. To this end, my cavalry and the eastern legionaries take the circuitous approach, first capturing the 2 towers at the northeastern city corner, and then maneuvering to the eastern avenue leading up to the town square. On the opposite side, the pikemen have completely plugged the western avenue with their phalanx, and are holding off almost the entire remaining enemy army, the perfect role for them. My southern stone throwers have also been put to good use, bombarding the cluster of enemies at the victory objective with what little ammunition they have. Dymas commands the rest of the infantry to approach the northern avenue, encountering and then swiftly defeating a single regiment of Celtic garrison warriors on the way. When Dymas and his men break through via the northern avenue, they encounter a significant number of remaining Aravisi, but the men are battered and surrounded as the cavalry have arrived to threaten the eastern enemy flank, followed shortly by the legionaries. The garrison commander and his cavalry find themselves facing our spear-equipped hoplite in what for them is a very unfavorable matchup, and Dymas and his retinue join briefly in the slaughter of the horsemen for good measure. With the remainder of the Aravisi infantry pressed into my pike wall, a determined rear strike by the legionaries, hoplite, and Dymas himself has the front row of enemies already wavering, and the effect is only exacerbated when the Longophori add to the chaos with their rear charge, and the battle ends decisively in our favor just a moment later. Over 600 losses and nearly 300 of these to friendly fire. It's not a battle result that I'm proud of necessarily, but Dymas gets the job done, again taking top honors for the kills scored by unit. with the only serious casualties suffered by a single unit of thorax legionaries and the Illyrian levies. We'll subjugate the Erevisi as planned, and hope to get another trade partner soon. The game engine hesitates, apparently a little bit confused by its own glitch, but thankfully manages to get back on track with the start of the in-turn sequence as originally planned. It wasn't what I had in mind, but I'll take it. The Erevisi read my mind and give me what I wanted once it's finally their turn, offering trade and a lump sum payment in exchange for the mercy of Dymas, who was relatively magnanimous in his victory. We've finished city planning, and although I don't think this has any effect by itself on our economy, our income has gone up, probably indicated in combination of completed projects, the new satrapal income from the Erevisi, as well as the new trade agreement. Somewhat annoyingly, an adoption attempt is underway to take Bryson away from Seleukos' faction. Like almost all of Rome II's political system, this incredible cost of 27,000 talents to prevent the adoption is not something I care for, but I'll pay it for now, since we have the means to do so. Back on topic with the technology tree, I've got to choose another one, and it's a bit of a shame that we'll never get to see the effects of the technology I just researched, or the one I'm selecting now, because we're so close to the end of the game, but I decided to try for the Cult of Alexander because I figured if we don't get our 90,000 talent surplus in the time it takes to finish the research, the combined direct effects of the technology and the Tier 3 bonus, in Empire maintenance penalty reduction no less, should put the nail in the coffin. Dymas, his work complete, moves back to garrison the border of Batavium and ensure the safety and compliance of the Erevisi in their new trade route. This has brought us to 14 of the needed 15, so I just need one more, and I try in vain to beg another trade partner from the diplomatic list. We also have about 30 regiments we can disband, before getting under the requisite 120, so Antigonos Doson, who's never been much of a military man to begin with, disbands his small force to save some money. I realized also that I already committed a separate governor Bacchides to Antioch on the Tiber, formerly known as Rome, so I go ahead and disband Antigonos as well, with the intent to repost him as the governor of Thrace in the following turn. Along with numerous other upgrades, I started working on the Tier 4 city centers at major provinces like Syria, but like most of the buildings in this episode, these will unfortunately never see the light of day due to the prolonged construction times. I checked again to verify the income level, and though we're still shy about 10,000 talents at the highest tax rate, I think we can make up this deficit with some further army cuts, bureaucratic adjustments, and the infrastructure we already have coming down the pike. The missing 15th trade partner remains elusive on the diplomatic tab, but I have a prime candidate in mind, that being the recently acquired Sesatani city of Tolosa, and coincidentally, Massalia is in our way both figuratively and literally in this sense, being both the missing region needed for the territorial objective, as well as a literal roadblock in the potential trade route to Tolosa. Antiochos Hierax's army is set, and though they've suffered some mild attrition, the bulk of the siege equipment is ready to go. Spurius Titinius has long since slipped away from the ranks of the army to parts unknown, but Hierax is more than ready to show the business end of the Seleukid Spear of War to the Massalian City Council. At this stage of the game, Massalia is a well-defended port city with a sturdy-looking rectangular layout, boasting a small inner keep of sorts in which the city temple, the meeting hall, council hall, and the victory objective are nestled. The defenders can match us in numbers if not in martial prowess, although they do have the walls of the city to hide behind, as well as her guard towers and bastion onagers at their disposal. Although I don't feel there is any easy approach to this victory objective, as it's kept so well behind multiple layers of defense, I see no reason to battle our way through 3 walls instead of just 2, so Antiochos Hierax, being a simple man like myself, chooses to concentrate his attack on the broad northern wall. A breach of this wall or its gate will at least enable us to seize one of the capture points before marching on the agora, which is ringed in an inner wall, without having to march through the gate that separates the eastern half of the city from the central and western portions. Hierax selects a leisurely spot from which to survey the assault, commanding the artillery from a position on either side by the cluster of houses and the opposite Massalian theater outside the city, while a solid wall of silver shield pikemen protect their commander from the front. Our infantry will be pushing the various siege equipment at different points on the wall in order to capture one or both of the north-facing gatehouses. As usual, I get the battering ram going first, although there's really no need to wait to assault the disparate sections of wall, so the siege towers and the ladders aren't far behind. The single Athobolus squadron gets to work on the wall between the 2 gatehouses, although I know the effort is going to take some time, with or without manual fire mode. The archer regiments, 2 of which feature the Syrian heavy armor, move forward fearlessly to duel with the Massalian Toxotoy on the wall. There's almost simultaneous arrival of the battering ram and the 2 adjacent ladders at and beside the main northern gatehouse. and as the silver-shield swordsmen crank back the ram for repeated ferocious strikes on the gate, the shield-bearer Royal Hoplite Infantry are the first onto the wall on either side of the gate, tearing into the green Massalian garrison infantry guarding the ramparts. I was really looking forward to seeing our silver-shield swordsmen storm off their siege tower onto the ramparts as well, but the light tower just hasn't stood up well to the Massalian fire arrows, and much to the alarm of its occupants, is itself now on fire. As the flames lick higher at the timbers, the swordsmen swallow their panic and attempt to exit the burning structure, even as it threatens to collapse around and on top of them. Fortunately, most of the men seem to have made it to the safety of the ground before the contraption goes full inferno, a dazzling spectacle in the midst of the battlefield, if nothing else. Their Silver Shield legionary comrades assaulting the gate have in the meantime managed to batter in the gatehouse door, and as they begin pushing the ram out of the way, Antiochos can barely contain himself as he runs to the front of the line, shouting and signaling for the elephants to go first.
Stop, just push the ram out of the way, and then move aside. I got so distracted watching that tower turn into a pillar of fire, I didn't realize they'd already breached the gate. Stand down, you fools, stand down. Remember, elephants first. Look at the cauldrons on top of the wall. I know you want to prove your valor to Zeus, but I need my elite warriors more than I need a silver slag heap at the foot of that gatehouse. Also, I want to elicit the appropriate level of awe from our Massalian opponents when we enter the city. We're bound to lose a few elephants, but cover them with the wet hides from the ram. That should prevent the worst injuries. What should you tell them, Ahouts? Tell them good luck.
The Silver Shields, denied the glory of first entry into the city, stand back reluctantly, poised cauldrons of boiling oil atop the gatehouse notwithstanding. The elephants are still a ways back, but their long strides will bring them to the gatehouse shortly. In the meantime, the other unit of Silver Shields pushing a light siege tower have very quietly found a spot to dock their contraption at the far western end of the northern wall, and are quickly moving out of the tower onto the wall, assembling their ranks and preparing to capture the gatehouse with no commotion whatsoever. With no other clear entrance, I send the cavalry across the battlefield to take advantage of this impending gate capture. Back at the decidedly more pitched battle taking place for the main northern gatehouse, the remaining Silver Shield legionary infantry have joined their shield-bearer brethren in scrambling up the ladders to assault the defenders on the walls adjacent to the gatehouse. The elephants arriving beneath the main gate pass under its arch and through the cascade of boiling oil, and fortunately the thick hide of the beasts seems to protect them from the worst of it, although we'll have to assume that the Mahouts have survived by covering themselves in water-soaked hides or other heat-resistant material. Most of the Massalian defenders in this vicinity are on the wall, out of reach of the elephants, but a few Toxotoy regiments remain on the ground west of the gate, and they're a prime target for the elephants, who go stampeding among their ranks, quickly eradicating all three units and swinging the missile advantage at the walls decisively in our favor. The Silver Shields at the northern gatehouse now have complete control of the gate and lift the bar and swing the doors wide open to admit the cavalry through this accessory entrance. The Hippoconti light skirmish cavalry dart off in search of the inner keep, while the citizen cavalry hang back slightly, making slower progress on pace with the elephants, who are also moving toward the nearby capture point. Though we haven't fully captured the northern gate, we have at least excluded it from Massalian hands and eliminated the threat of boiling oil. At the same time, a section of the adjacent wall finally crumbles from prolonged subjugation to Lithobolus fire. And with the way now open into the city, Antiochos Hierax rouses his retinue to action, leading the royal swordsmen and the Silver Shield pikes toward the gate and the breach. The Hippoconti have encountered a couple of garrison spear regiments, and the lead unit of horsemen have, in their zeal, galloped right into the midst of the spearmen. Though they're on skirmish mode, it's necessary to manually pull them out of combat and withdraw them to the safety of the nearby capture point, where the elephants and the remainder of the cavalry have gathered, losing a few horsemen in the process. The Massalian garrison hoplites, holding the wall, are fighting an effectively lost battle, but they bravely hold their ground, occupying my Silver Shields a bit longer, costing us some fatigue and delay, but little else. Hierax enters the city through the breach, striding through the rubble with impunity as the legionaries on the wall to either side of his retinue have neutralized the risk of incoming arrow fire from the gatehouse, the towers, or the Massalian archer infantry. The Viceroy makes his way to the capture point and quickly seizes control of it as he reorganizes his infantry and assesses the state of the assault. We've lost a handful of swordsmen, shield-bearers, elephants, and cavalry, but the only unit to have sustained significant losses is the single unit of unarmored Greek Toxotoy, who suffered the most in the exchange of arrow fire with the Massalian archers on the wall. Again, Hierax sends the elephants forward first, knowing that they'll inflict the most shock and awe on his opponents, although the going won't be easy for the great beasts this time, as there are several medium spear infantry inside the inner keep. As the garrison spearmen struggle to keep the elephants at bay, Hierax makes use of his silver shield pikemen to wall off the entrance to the keep and begins slowly closing the vice on the Massalian general and his men. The pikemen move to either side of the keep entrance and begin capturing the solitary functioning tower as Hierax himself comes forward, and the elephants press deeper into the temple complex, whipping themselves into a berserk state in spite of their now heavy losses. In the confusion, the Massalian garrison captain, Arsonides, seizes on a desperate gambit, charging straight through with his own decidedly less glamorous retinue of garrison hoplites and the adjacent Massalian cavalry to cause the elephants to move backward, right into our men who have gathered behind them. There are only a few elephants left by this point, so this maneuver doesn't actually cause that much damage, but it does create a confused, chaotic melee at the keep entrance and causes a brief flicker of panic for Hierax as his crazed Syrian war elephants begin careening toward his own retinue. Irrespective of the confusion caused by the elephants, the arrival of the more silver-shield swordsmen and the relentless press of the pike phalanx accelerates the inevitable fall of the city and the decisive defeat of its garrison. It goes without saying that the elephants did the hard work in this battle, scoring over 560 kills and losing about 2/3 of their number in the process, while Hierax's retinue of royal swordsmen really did take some serious casualties from the berserk beasts, so we're probably lucky he wasn't killed by the Massalian leader's desperate but cunning gamble. Subjugating Massalia would have been my choice here, but this isn't their only province, as one of their generals has been prosecuting a war with the Celtic barbarians to the north, and taking significant territory for his efforts. I decided to just occupy the city, since this will meet our criteria for the provincial capture as well as pave the way for our trade route to Tolosa. The Sessetani, although initially reticent, do agree to trade in exchange for an inconsequential bribe of 1,000 talents. This fulfills all of the victory requirements except the 90,000 talents, and right now we can push our income up to 81,000 if we crank the tax level all the way up. The next season, receiving word of his brother's unsanctioned capture of the Massalian city-state and his planned military coup, Kallinikos decides to take matters into his own hands, leaving the city of Antioch under the temporary direction of Hyginus, while the emperor departs in secret from the port to rendezvous with Dymas. Meanwhile, Antiochos Hierax has not been idle, and dispatches his ally Antigonos Doson to seize control of Thrace and the lucrative slave trade, preparing to deprive the relatively austere eastern kingdom of the vital trade resources, wealth, and slaves that have flowed from the west for decades. I spend my wealth on the buildings of my choice, although as noted previously, by this point none of the choices will come to fruition. I do have just a little bit more room to cut military expenditures, although I'm not sure we can reach the 90,000 talents on cuts alone at this point. I try cutting some of the more expensive troops like cavalry and elite infantry, starting with a slight reduction in Antiochos' border patrol army in Scythia, removing the somewhat costly Indo-Iranian cavalry and the Akkadian elite infantry, providing about 2,000 in savings. Likewise, Sophocles' local armored Scythian archer infantry are costing a pretty penny, and I'm able to save about another 1,000 by disbanding these units, and a further 750 or so by reducing his excessive number of Lonkophori. This leaves us about 4,000 short of the goal, so we'll just have to wait one more turn and see where the buildings in progress will leave us. However, I'm not quite prepared for the unfortunate surprise of the following turn. The last vestige of the old guard and the only character remaining from the original pool, Euclid, the close advisor and friend of the old Emperor Antiochos I Soter, has died of old age in the far eastern lands of Bactria. Just as Diogenes was replaced by his younger doppelganger Bryson, the eerily similar Daphis takes Euclid's place as the Bactrian satrap and commander of the Goose's Elegy. We've actually lost some ground on our income, for some reason, the total surplus dropping to 79,000 in spite of the changes we made, so it seems we'll need to keep pushing toward the goal. In the meantime, I've identified the sanitation in several provinces like Italia as a potential public order issue for the near term, which I'm addressing with the construction of aqueduct and well sanitation infrastructure. The following turn, our income still hasn't budged, but we've managed to get two important rank ups, one for Cleon, the governor of Syria, and the other for Adelphius at Lilobaon. Both get the all-important empire maintenance reduction trait that sends our income soaring by almost 6,000 talents. This puts the income goal almost in reach once again. Seleukos Kallinikos, preparing to confront his brother, meets with Dymas at Medlon in Liguria, the latter putting his own army at his emperor's disposal, while the opportunistic Spurius Titanius joins the emperor's side as they prepare to depart from the city. I couldn't acquire any more trade agreements or find any other clear ways to push my income up, but decided to try putting a few of my army commanders directly into their nearby cities to see if their supposed governor effects from doing so would have any effect on income, although it did not seem so at the time. Now in the fall of 216 BC, we've reached the penultimate term of the campaign as evidenced by the sharp jump in our income, as well as the impending clash in the Western Alps. We can now very easily hit the 90,000 talent threshold by ramping up the taxes. I'm not sure why it came up so suddenly, but may simply be due to several buildings being completed. As for the Brothers' War, it was a civil war I'd planned from the beginning of this campaign, although DEI makes civil war actually very unlikely. I'd considered trying to hack the DEI pack file to raise the chance and force a civil war, but in the end decided it would make a mess of my campaign, the story, or both. In any event, as things stand now, Kallinikos has arrived at the western border of Genoa with the dragons of Bel Marduk to preempt his brother's military coup, while Hierax, moving almost as swiftly, brings his more elite force along the southern edge of the mountains, although he's forced to stop and encamp for the winter as the rightful emperor and the would-be usurper face off. Spurius Titanius, ever the wild card in the struggle for imperial power, arrives with Seleukos to the east, but slips out of the camp before the winter snows arrive, carrying an offer of peace and amnesty to the roaming Massalian army in Aquitania. And it seems they've accepted, although the terms of the arrangement are known only to the two parties. Seleukos Kallinikos' economic victory is complete. He has balanced the budget, remunerated the army's back pay, and brokered durable treaties with the nations at the imperial periphery. Only his brother's mad attempt to seize power and the complicity of Antigonos Doson and the viceroy's plan stand in the way of a global peace, a Pax Seleucia for decades to come. For his part, Antiochos Hierax finds himself trapped, unable to go forward or back without a decisive encounter with his older brother, and unable to weather the harsh winter in the mountains. Reputed to be the most ferocious warrior in the kingdom, at the head of a world-class army, Hierax has nothing to lose and everything to gain, as the Hawk's Talons strike camp and march to war, the fate of the Empire hanging in the balance.
You must understand the choice before you. You're my soldiers, my silver legionaries, the inexorable phalanx, the shield-bearers, and the royal companions. But if you press forward now against the army of the Emperor Seleukos, you will become an enemy of the state, a traitor, and if we lose, you will all be hunted down like common brigands. But if I win, I'll do the same to my brother's loyalists. You will all have a high place in the new order, but ask yourself this: do you want the opiates of my grandfather and his successor, or do you want something glorious? I'll take you to the ends of the earth. I'll make you into gods. You must ask yourself, will the hawk triumph? Yes, swordsman forward, gouge his flank with the phalanx. Elephants crush them underfoot. But I want my brother taken alive, if possible.
Commander, the gods have deserted us. We're losing. I know nothing of the gods, Captain, but your men are certainly deserting us. You must all stay and fight. There is valor in an honorable death, an honorable defeat even. Wait! Look there, on the horizon!
The Massalians intervened on behalf of my grandfather, and that's how he won, because it was plain to gods and men alike that he was no match for Antiochos Hierax on the battlefield. Hierax was taken back alive and handed over to the Massalians, while Seleukos collected the meek Antigonos Doson on the way back to Syria, without a fight of course. One head, as you know, wound up on the chopping block at Antioch, while the other most likely decorated the end of a Celtic spear at the city gates of Massalia. The gods answered the prayers of Seleukos Kallinikos and Antiochos Hierax in their usual mischievous manner, granting both men what they had asked, but what neither wanted. Are you writing this down? You know the rest. My father, Antiochos III, called Megas or the Great in the Punic language, ascended to the throne after his elder brother died. At first enthralled to his advisors, but progressively gaining strength and independence, he threw off their yoke, and then propelled the empire to heady new heights, pushing further into Gaul, and even making a brief foray into Britannia. My father was at the same time the greatest and most disappointing emperor this nation has ever had, and he greatly underestimated the Carthaginian desire to take back their capital city and seize control of the Mediterranean, or their capacity to do so, for that matter. Hierax was the first to bring elephants through the Alps, but he wouldn't be the last. The loss of the western half of our territories was compounded by the terrible war indemnity demanded by the Carthaginian peace treaty. I don't hate the Carthaginians. I was treated well as their hostage. And history, as they say, is written by the victors. No, I don't mean that literally. You Babylonians have been losing for hundreds of years, and those scratchings on your temple rocks hardly qualify as history. You asked why I resorted to robbing the temples of my subject peoples, and that's your answer. These gods are deaf to their followers anyway, and if they keep making trouble for me, I'll be a worse scourge to them than Nebuchadnezzar. Now there was a great Babylonian.
Father, here they come. They're laden with the temple treasures. They slaughtered pigs on the temple altar. They forced Jews to eat the unclean animals. I heard the Seleukid god king is with them. We should catch him and kill him. No, my sons, not god king. Mad king, there is only one God, and he is with the people of Israel. Lift your hammers like my son Judas here, and strike down the enemies of God.